just a few things as the microphone go around and we get from the participant. You've talked of quite a number of things, and one of the questions you've asked, what is the problem? Because the things we are discussing, as you have correctly observed, nothing is really new to us. And why are those things happening? Or is it that maybe I ask it directly, is it that we are inferior human beings, maybe in this part of the world as Africa? Or why would the same thing that we are talking about is what others are applying? For us, we know it, we teach about it, we write books about it. Other people copy from us what we have written, but it's not working for us. What is the problem?
I would have loved to hear from the audience what the problem is, actually.
Because we Africa can say we are cursed.
No, I don't think we are cursed. I don't think we are cursed. So we know it, but we don't do it. And I posed a number of questions there. For me, it's two things. One is commitment to the cause, right? So are we really committed to seeing our institutions succeeding, right? Because if we are, then there are certain things which we then must do. But if we are not, for whatever reason, then we shall remain where we are and we continue to say this. And it's not an African problem, actually. As you've noted, a number of organizations right across the world, we can pick up many examples. It comes back to humanity, to ourselves as human beings, and the extent to which we can be committed to a cause. For example, if it was your own business, it's unlikely that you'd be stealing from it. Unlikely, right? You'd be having certain safeguards to ensure that those kind of things don't happen. And this is why all these rules and regulations are there now, because you recall that any time there's a failure, there are more rules that are created. But rules alone cannot solve it. I think it requires us to have some deeper sense of commitment to the cause here. You know, after the collapse in the US of Enron and all those other companies, the introduction of the Sarbanes-Oxley regulations, which required board members to become more involved in understanding what was happening in the business, and that became a global, at least there were regulations that were introduced for international companies. And I was lucky because I was kind of fortunate because I then spent 2 years overseeing the implementation of Sarbanes-Oxley across different countries in Africa that where Barclays had operations in. Because it was really important to ensure that board members don't start saying, we don't know, we were not told, right? They would rather be saying, yes, we knew and we were told, but we still made this decision. And that decision was a bad decision, but not that we didn't know. So I would say, Jeremiah, that that commitment to the cause for me is important. Of course, around it ensures that we understand what we are supposed to be doing, our roles and responsibilities. We put the right systems in place, there are the right consequences and penalties and other forms of deterrent in place so that we can see that. But also that there are the right kind of incentives also in place, because human beings like doing things where there's some incentive. So do we have the right incentives for us to continue doing the right thing? It's not the greatest way of looking at it, but we like incentives.
Thank you. I think, Martin, other than the dream team, the other thing you are known for in this country is KCB. When you look at KCB, where it was when you came on board as the MD, and where you left it. And you've talked about stakeholder management here. And just thinking through, KCB, majority shareholder by then was government. And even today, government still holds significant number of shares. how you dealt with all those stakeholders and reform the institution. And of course, there are people who would feel maybe they are not, what you are doing is not the right way. There are some maybe who were used in doing things in one way or another. You have to be. So what is the, in terms of reform, when you are bringing reform, how do you balance? There is the governance aspects which you have to deal with. There is the stakeholder engagement. There is all these kind of people have their own interests. How did you do it to get KCB where it was? But lastly, connected to that, also the issue of succession planning. Because one can do very well as a leader, but as soon as you leave, the organization comes down. But we see KCB even long after your departure, we still is doing very well. So what is one thing that we can learn from how you handle succession planning?
So, in terms of what did we do to get it to move from one place to another? First of all, obviously, and I've said it in that book, it was a team effort. It wasn't a Martin effort. Yeah, well, I put some effort in it, but at the end of the day, it's everybody pulling together. And so the secret is, how do you get everybody to pull together to align on the course? And it all starts again with the strategy. It starts with the vision. We did recreate the vision at the bank then. If I remember, we had a vision before my time which read something like to be the best bank in the region. And then we started asking questions, what does this mean? What does best mean? What does region mean, etc. And so we expanded it a little bit. It's 12 years since I left KCB, so I may not remember this very, very clearly. But we recrafted that vision to read something like, to be the preferred provider of financial solutions in Africa with global reach, or something like that. So we expanded the vision to say, okay, we don't just want to be a bank, we want to be a financial solutions provider. And therefore we could do many things inside there. Digital, insurance, other things. Wanted to be preferred, and therefore we needed to get our people to understand how do you get yourself to be preferred? What kind of customer centric things should you be doing to get you there? We were largely a Kenyan bank, and we wanted to, some of our growth we saw was going to come out of Kenya, out of being too Kenyan. Therefore, in Africa, so we saw ourselves as a continental institution, but with global reach. And so we put a lot of work in cascading that vision, right from the top to across all the employees and across all the institutions. We had the board. We had to get the board to align on this vision as well. So we had people saying, let's just stay here. It's nice here. But we said, there are opportunities elsewhere, and we can continue to grow here. Even as we look outside as well. And so that whole team alignment was important for us. We looked at our strategy right from the vision. We looked at our values. We crafted those values that we had as well, just to make sure that we're being driven by the right motivations as values, and that we could hold people to account in that respect. We also put in place the right incentives, right, for the staff, for all the teams, etc. And we started doing small things like just making sure that our offices made sense. I mean, with the greatest respect to government and government offices, those of you who have worked in government, the way that the offices were created. This concrete corridor, and with all these concrete offices, with doors which are always closed, we physically broke down walls in Kencom House and created open plan of including for the CEO, right? So that people could walk around and see whether I was there, whether I was dozing, whether I was not there, whether I was just on phone throughout. We opened up spaces. So the culture change and revolution helped that. So there were many things that we did which were all linked to strategy, and all that helped that the organization to start moving forward. And when people saw that we started doing better, and our performance was increasing year on year by 30%, 40%, they started believing, and therefore people came to the core. When they saw us opening up, 1 year in South Sudan, another year in Uganda, another year in Rwanda, another year in Burundi, strengthening Tanzania, growing the network in Kenya. So there are a lot of things which then began to come together. And when I joined KCB, I think the profits that year were 912 million. When I left after 7 years, it was 20 billion. Right. So there's a lot of growth which the asset base was like 90 billion. It was like 300 or 400 billion at the end of those 7 years. So many things rallied together, but a lot of it was driven by the people. And you ask about stakeholder management and government. In a way, I was also fortunate because I was a CEO during the reign of President Mwai Kibaki. And that gave a lot of freedom to operate. I didn't undergo any political pressures to do this or not to do the other. So I was, in a way, lucky. I was at the right place at the right time, right? And it helped. It helps. All these things help. Maybe it was luck, all right? So that was the other thing and therefore they allowed us to run the bank. If we needed government, because I went in when government was 27%, we did a number of rights issues where government didn't participate. I came out when they were 18%, 18 or 19, which is still where they are today, government shareholding in that one. So we diluted government a little bit, and again, they allowed us to do that, generated funds for the growth of the institution. So that's how we managed, but we kept a cordial relationship with government. We had good ministers, Amos Kimunya and others. So that was KCB. Now, what about succession? I would like to say that on the succession planning side, it was always something that was on the board agenda, right? So remember, I came in as a deputy to Terry Davidson. So I came in and served as a deputy CEO for 1.5 years. Then at the end of his contract, he didn't renew it, and therefore the board went through a selection process, actually. It wasn't just handed over to me. We went through a process, and at the end of it, where we had internal candidates and external candidates, I was then appointed. And when my term to leave came, 7.5 years later, again, the board went through a process. We had a restructuring, went through a process, and that process yielded Joshua Yegara, who was my finance director at the time. So he came in as a finance director, and then he took over from me. And when Joshua's term ended after 9 years, Paul Russo, who was the HR director, again, through the succession process, took over. So I would like to say that succession is a big thing for boards. It should always be on the board agenda, so that you make, and not just at the CEO level only, but across all the other levels in the organization. And we had a process where every year the board went through the succession metrics, who was where, who was ready, who was not ready, what do you do to train people to become ready for when the time comes, who is ready now, who is going to be ready in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, and what are you doing to build them? And those are good tools for boards to use.
Thank you. We now want to open for questions. There is a good book that, on recommendation of Professor Idima here, he recommended I read a book called From Good to Great. And that book talks a lot about succession planning. It's actually based on research. They have done a lot of research in the US. And one of the recommendations that they came up with is maybe aligned very much with KCB. They say most of the time, actually I think they give a percentage, 70% probability that if you get a successor from in-house, inside, you are more likely to succeed from external, from their research, and especially for the position of the CEO after the many research they did, which I found very amazing because I had thought it's the other way around. So, any question, you can raise up your hand. Yes, there is one here.
Thank you so much, FCS Dr. Martin Oduor, for that erudite presentation. My question is, do you think being a director might have lost its appeal, particularly in the current corporate governance environment, in which and this actually, the question is also informed from a conversation that I had from one of the directors in a bank, and she told me that there are some institutions that she can't actually participate as a director. If she receives such an appointment, then she would have to turn it down because of perhaps reputational risk. And again, I think you mentioned the good case of Chase Bank, where we've seen directors. Again, a person very close to me was actually a director in that bank, and a non-executive director for that matter. And when the bank went down, of course CMA came, and a lot of FT penalties were actually imposed. So in how do you navigate, for instance, in particularly in government circles, where there can be calls made for directors to take a particular financial direction or procurement or human resource direction? How do you navigate that? And now, now that you've sat in a number of boards, are there boards, okay, this can be a bit personal, but are there boards which you'd actually receive an appointment and say, not today, no thank you?
Thank you. We can have two others. We'll only take three.
Dr. Martin, for that nice presentation on about the board. Maybe I would like to refer to the news gang yesterday. They talked about the Euro board, which we are about to get, and somebody said that we have primitive greed in this country, because when we get the Euro board, sometimes the money you cannot trace to where the money went or was used for. Then we have had about 2,000 civil servants who have fake degrees. And somebody was asking, if I am saying somebody has a fake degree, and I also have a fake degree, the person who is identifying that person, because how did you even recruit this person if you had a good degree? My point is, we may be having all the qualifications, or we are professionals, we have so many certificates.
And you gave examples of the penalties with the Chase Bank. If you looked at the CMA and Uchumi, you would have actually seen, where it all started as well. Some of those board members were fined personally, 2 million, 5 million shillings, etc. Some of them were barred from ever holding board positions for a certain period of time, 6 months, 2 years, etc. Some of them were sent back to school, to corporate governance, to go and learn corporate governance. So if you go back and read the Uchumi and CMA and the outcomes of that investigation and the penalties that were meted. And some of those were really senior people that are known to all of us, or to many of us. So you start saying, should I really be there? And if I'm there, what is my role to avoid this kind of thing? So what has happened is that directorships have not lost their appeal, but it now requires us to be much more diligent in what we take and what we don't take. And we should be courageous enough to say no, right? If you're going to end up in a place that is going to really muddy your reputation completely, because as Warren Buffett says in one of his books or sayings, if you lose me money, I will forgive you. If you lose me reputation, I will fire you or kill you or something. Because reputation once lost, you don't get it back. People will always make reference to that, right? And so it just says, you cannot call me today, say, Martin, there's a board here, come and sit on it. And I say, yes, where are the papers to sign? No. I will ask you many questions. I will go back and do investigation on that organization. I will check who are the current board members. I will go back into, and these days of Google is our friend. There's nobody whom you cannot find. You can dig up their history. It's all there for all of us to see. And therefore, I will find out who is on that board, what they have done before, etc., before I actually say yes to the organization. I will look at the organizational performance over years. I will ask questions about it. So yes, so I don't take board positions just because I'm invited. There's much more beyond that, because as I've said, the consequences of some of these things could be grave. Navigating the challenges within government boards or state corporation boards is something that is not easy, again, depending on which organizations you are in, just because of what you've raised and some of the interests which may be around. And again, you just need to make that decision, sort of say, yes, do I want to be part of this? And if I am, what are the consequences? And how would I deal with those consequences? Or do I want to opt out? And nobody stops us from opting out. Nobody drags you by the neck and says you must sit on this board, right? And so it is a choice. Life is a choice anyway. We decide to do that, etc. And we know the consequences, so we need to understand that. I would say that, again, it comes back to the point that was raised earlier. What are your values? And what's your attitude to this whole governance thing, right? And if you're able to answer that question, then it will help you make the right decision for yourself. And all of us are different. But as CSS, as practitioners of governance, I think we must uphold our values, right? Otherwise, I think, Jeremiah, you have a disciplinary committee.
Yes.
You should put people through that committee, right? If they're not upholding their values. There's a question about, it was actually a comment that you made and ended up with these values and attitude. So you talked about fake degrees, Eurobond. I would just like to say that again, one of the other big topics today in governance is ethical leadership, right? And again, it's something that is important for us. Around the time of COVID, there's a big pharmaceutical company or the company that runs pharmacies, Discam. So in the early days of COVID, when PPEs and masks were being introduced, they had been selling masks at, I don't know, let's say 1 unit of money. and they increased that price to about 8 units, right? And the ombudsman took them to a tribunal. And this is public information, you can Google it after this, and this is a case study that you can look at. And the board of directors was actually dragged through that tribunal, and they were asked, how could they sit and oversee a company that, without caring about the social aspects of this disease and the impact on people, increased their price of masks, which was a life-saving thing, by almost 8 times. And all the committees in there were being probed, right? The HR committee, the audit committee, the strategy committee, the social and ethics committee. They were all brought up before the tribunal to answer questions as to what they were thinking when they were doing this. They were fined lots and lots of money, right? I would actually recommend that you read that, you Google and read it tomorrow over the weekend if you have nothing else to do, right? But it just shows that this question of ethical leadership is also a really, really important thing for us as board members and as members of this profession, of the governance profession. There's a question about continuous learning in boards and per diems and limitation of budgets. All I can say else is that as we are sitting here right now, I would really hope that we take away at least one thing from this gathering, right? And I think that those board members who go out, even just because of per diems, if they're actually sitting in the classroom, they take away at least one thing, right? Yes, they get their per diems, but they will remember one thing from that engagement. And governance and leadership is a journey. It's not an event, right? And we've got to look for that continuous improvement in our processes, in our systems, in the way that we run governance. So we should not necessarily be disappointed that they are looking for, except if they look for per diems and then you don't even find them there. They go shopping when they're supposed to be in class, which happens also, right? Then those ones get nothing completely, right? But if they stay there even for half a day, that's good enough for them to carry something away. And I would just say that on the question of the budget, the company secretaries or whoever is coordinating this needs them to just have targeted trainings. What is it that is a real pain point for this board, so that those trainings are targeted at something specific, which can fit within the budget that's available, right? So don't try and conquer the whole world. Just think about what is it that we can do within this budget for this time, even as you appeal and negotiate for bigger budgets for next time. The question of family-owned businesses, yes, as I've said, it's a choice. If I'm invited by a family-owned business and my voice is not being heard, my ideas are not being heard, my perspective is not being recognized or respected, then what am I doing there? Yeah. So again, you choose. Either you want to continue because you are a friend of the founder and him and his family are going to be disappointed with you. They'll say, oh, what kind of friend do we have here who can't even come and support us in our business? But that's not the question. Because in the unfortunate incident that things start going wrong, you are part of this and you cannot get out of it, right? And that friendship will not really count for much. So again, it's all a choice, and have courage. Don't be scared to say no to board appointments or to come out of boards when you feel that your worth or your value is no longer being appreciated. Or if the risks are too much and you've raised your voice is not being heard, things are not being done the way they should be done, don't be scared to walk out of that institution or that board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Once again, let's give Martin another round of applause. We highly appreciate. I think for me, there is one thing you mentioned about taking home one thing. If there is one thing I take home, is about being bold. If you know what you are doing is the right thing, whether you are the CS, whether you are the board member, whether you are whoever, but being bold to take that one thing, do that one thing that you think is the right thing. We highly appreciate. I think with that, I want first to appreciate all of us, and then I want to invite our council member who is present, CS William Kema. CS William Kema is also serving as the chair of the young members. So if you are a young member, here is your chair to make the closing remarks and officially close for us this talk, and thereafter we will proceed. I'm told it's a Friday evening, Friday night, so you can, where else are you going? We can just be together, taking snacks together and networking. Thank you. And Martin is available as we are networking. Martin is available to sign for you the book once you purchase from, you say there's a beautiful lady? Yes, from the beautiful lady.
Thank you so much, FCS. I think we can appreciate the FCS CEO for that good facilitation. Again, FCS Dr. Martin, I think words are not enough to thank you for taking your time to come and speak to us this evening. And for myself, I think there is no better place I'd rather be on a Friday evening than just listening to the wisdom of FCS Dr. Martin. And Dr. You mentioned something about a verse in the good book that speaks about listening but not practicing. Yes. And I actually went to, I remembered the verse.
You found it?
Yes.
Okay.
I found it, and I thought it would be very, very apt and applicable for all of us. It's in the book of John 1:23. And one thing, allow me to equate it to the talk that we've had this evening. Something about John. John was, the time was writing, this was an elderly man with a lot of wisdom. And when you read that book, it makes a lot of references to, I speak to you young men. I speak to you young, there is that reference because he's speaking as a father. And I think that analogy is quite apt for you because you have been in these circles. You've been a CEO of blue chip companies, board chair, board member, and it's such a privilege to just listen to you. And for the rest of us, I think now the verse will actually apply to us, as you mentioned. This is what John says, 1:23, that anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forget what it looks like. And we know that the issues that Dr. has mentioned are quite emotive. And as Kenyans, we like, of course, when we like asking questions that I have asked. And when we sometimes we move and forget what we've been taught. So it is actually my hope that all of us will actually be reflective and put into practice what Dr. has really given to us. And as Dr. was speaking, when I saw it was Dr. was coming, and after looking at his profile, I remembered those speakers that we will have in high school, and you're told that this is actually the person who sits the exam, who's coming to talk to you. And when that speaker stands to say good evening, you write that good evening. It's actually, I wrote that good evening because there are some people who carry a certain kind of weight. So I'd like us to appreciate Dr. with a clap. Thank you so much, Dr. And we highly treasure your presence and your word of wisdom. And I would like also allow me to recognize former council members who are my seniors and close friends. Former chairperson, FCS Madenge. Thank you so much. And I think I saw CS Malakai Adede. Please wave at your people. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. I hope I've not left anyone out. Okay, Kimeli, I thought you were standing because you're a former council member. But thank you. And even the chair of the RSPS board, Thank you so much, CSRP. So at this juncture, thank you so much.